Today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about medical marijuana and why this is fitting in with the theme for our presentation this semester. If I can get this turned on. Cannabis is a plant that's been used in the United States for 400 years, and it's a plant that's been used by man for possibly 8,000 years. So when we look at history of plants and domesticated plants, corn, wheat, rice, these all came along very early. Cannabis came first. Okay? Cannabis initially was a fiber crop. It was used by early ancestors in clay pots to make them stronger. We still do that in hempcrete to make it stronger. Textiles and fibers were used. Ooh, that's really touchy. So it's been around for a long time, and as I said before, when it was first brought to the United States, it was required by the early colonists that they produce so many acres of this because there was such a high need, a demand for fiber. So if you were going to be a colonist in the new colonies, fiber was one thing you were going to have to do. And if you think about it, this isn't magic. It was simply a great fiber. The fibers are long, they're natural, they don't break, and during that time, maritime ships were sailing ships. They needed canvas sails. They needed cordage, ropes to run this. So this was a very big commodity. And it stayed that way for a very long time in the United States. So as we see that breaking down, as that need for canvas, you had canvas shoes. No, you didn't. I had canvas shoes when I was a child. And that canvas was not cannabis. My parents' canvas was cannabis, right? So we've gone from that into that. So you get an idea of what that cannabis fiber was like. When we look at what can be done with cannabis, it's really outstanding. I mean, this is a miraculous plant for so many reasons from a botanist standpoint, simply because it has some unique characters. Like I said, the fibers are long, and we've got two kinds of fiber in that. We've got the bast and the hurd, and the bast are really long. That's what you make clothes and cordage out of. Very durable, very long lasting, nearly bulletproof. In World War I, all of our Allied military uniforms were made out of cannabis. This was a big problem as in 1937, as we saw cannabis being criminalized, the United States government was looking at, well, what are we going to do about uniforms? Because we're thinking about starting this other war, getting into this other war that's going on in Europe, and we don't have that because the cannabis at this time was all coming from the Philippines, which was allied with Japan, and we didn't have that opportunity to make uniforms out of the same products. So they legalized cannabis again in the late 30s, early 40s, moving into World War II. Of course, by that time, all of the farmers that had been growing it had gotten rid of their equipment and had stopped growing it and had grown something else. So now when the American government said, hey, we'd like you to grow this for us, yeah, it didn't really happen. A couple of farmers still had stuff around the farm. They said, okay, we'll do it. But there was no processing, and it really kind of fell flat on its face. The last legal cannabis farm in the United States was in Wisconsin, and it shut down. He stopped in 57. Okay, so we've got a myriad of things going on now, and this isn't a new concept. It's kind of like the environmental push. It's not new. It just kind of circles around, and people talk about it, and circles around, and people talk about it. All the way back in 1939, this was right after cannabis had been criminalized. The Marijuana Tax Act had basically put cannabis to bed. Because now, even though it was highly used medicinally in the United States, lots of prescription drugs, lots of prescriptions were being written for it, medical and scientific community weren't really invited to the congressional hearings that criminalized it. So kind of maybe a school board you're familiar with, they've got this thing that they want to pass, but they know there's going to be a lot of people complaining about it, so they don't put it on the agenda until the last minute. Maybe nobody will know. That's what Congress did. And so very poorly represented, and they got it through. And then afterwards, scientific community and the medical community is like, but we're using this medically. Yeah, sorry, it's illegal. Okay. So by 39 in New York, LaGuardia started a campaign where all the propaganda that was proposed in Congress to get it criminalized, they said, okay, let's see the science behind it. Let's get the medical studies. Let's get the scientists on board. And what they found out was not that stuff that was true, or none of that stuff that Congress had said about cannabis to get it criminalized was true. There was no backing in the science. Okay, so that was in 1939. It stayed illegal, and you probably remember DARE. Most of you probably went through the DARE program, right? And this was a war on drugs, and this was a gateway drug. It was identified as a gateway drug. Well, being a scientist, being a biologist, it's not. Okay, the gateway drug, and you know this, the gateway drug for all of us was and is sugar. Right? Sugar's not food, it's a drug. So I'm not saying don't use this drug. I'm just saying be aware of what you're doing. How many times do you see parents modifying behavior, drug, be good, and daddy will get you a cookie. If you shut up during church, we'll get ice cream afterwards. It's a drug. Cannabis, not a drug. So the war on drug, during the Nixon years, Schaefer report was done, and the Schaefer report had better technology, better scientists, better studies being done. And what they said was, this is ridiculous. All that stuff you said about cannabis in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, none of that's true. Okay? It was still a Schedule I narcotic. A Schedule I narcotic, by definition, has two premises. One, it has a high incidence of addiction. Okay? Number two, no medical qualities at all. Okay? So we know that it's got a strong evidence of addiction. We know that it's got no evidence of being used for medicine. Wait a minute. Neither on either one of those. So why is it Schedule I narcotic? Well, lots of conspiracy theories. The reality was we've got all kinds of history of why it was criminalized. And what we're looking at now is just kind of getting away from that stigma of this is a Schedule I narcotic. This is a gateway drug. You know, this is bad. So here we are. Okay, flash forward to 1996, Compassionate Care Act. This was a big, big step forward in the annals of cannabis. Okay? And the reason was, federally, this was still a felony, Schedule I narcotic. This is a felony for possession, for use, for sales. California really went out on a limb and said, you know, this is ridiculous. We've got the science, we've got the medicine, we've got the backing that says none of these things are true. And I don't care what, this is California, we don't care what the federal government threatens, what they're going to, you know, do or not do. We're going to make it legal for our people in California to utilize this as medicine. Okay. And a lot of times you'll hear people talk about recreational or medical. Again, there's really no difference, because if you think about it, if I'm in pain, if I'm anxious, if I can't sleep, I'm miserable. So am I taking cannabis because it makes me happy, or am I taking cannabis because it eliminates the anxiety, the pain, allows me to sleep at night? Well, of course I'm going to be happier because I'm no longer in pain. So it's not a matter of I'm taking this for fun, I'm taking this so I feel better, and guess what? When I feel better, I'm happier. 38 states, 38 out of 50 have some level of legalization. This is an interactive map that I took off the internet, and it's no longer interactive because I guess it's copyrighted. So we've got states that have both. We have states that have just medical, and Iowa's a good example of what can go wrong. They had medical, and then they tightened the rules on allowing people to grow in Iowa so badly that they couldn't grow enough to fill the dispensaries for people that had medical cards to go get it. So it really is legal, but very, very hard to get and very hard to make any money on it. So if you're in the cannabis industry, Iowa's not really the place you want to go because you're not going to be able to do that. Okay. So as we look at what's happened, we look at medical marijuana and we understand by this point, tons more research is being done than was ever done. When it was Schedule I narcotic, federally, it's still illegal. So, for example, Iowa, you can't bring cannabis into Iowa for medical patients. It has to be grown in the state. But they've, like I said, allowed so few people to grow in the state, there's not enough to actually make it a business. So they can come to Illinois, buy up to a half an ounce, take it back to Iowa, where it's still illegal. Where you see the problem, right? What they're saying is you can have medical marijuana, you just can't have medical marijuana. Okay, let's keep that up. What does this all do for us? We have naturally in our bodies, okay, the endocannabinoid system. It's like your reproductive system, your respiratory system, cardiovascular system. We have on our neurons receptor sites. Cannabis has phytocannabinoids in it that link to those receptor sites. Now, these phytomolecules, plant-based molecules that come from cannabis, will break down and release from our natural body, like hormones or these chemicals in our body, an anandamide. Now, we have genetically internal and external sources of anandamide. You like chocolate because it makes you feel better, right? Why? Because it releases anandamide into your body. Now, we all have different levels, right? You may have won the genetic lottery, and maybe you naturally have a higher level of anandamide than somebody else. People question me all the time. Why are you so happy? What are you grinning about? I'm just lucky, I guess. Some people don't have that, right? So if I'm here as opposed to here, and I can take a food, cinnamon, chocolate, whatever, and cause my body to release more anandamide, I'm here. There you go. So anandamide is one of those things that we release in response. So when we take food, for example, your body has to be able to identify everything you consume, everything you ingest. Your body has to be able to identify it as one of three things. Is it food? In which case, I'm going to digest it, send it into my bloodstream, and send it to all the cells of my body. Is it waste? If it is, I'm going to pass it through my body as quickly as possible. Is it poison? If it's poison, I'm going to send it to my liver and try to detoxify it before I move it into my bloodstream, before it can cause damage. So I have to be able to identify. My body has to be able to identify everything I consume. Cannabis is food. I know it's food and not one of the other two because of how my body deals with it. My body ingests, digests, and then sends it over my bloodstream to all the cells of my body. All the cells of my body have receptor sites. So cell, receptor sites, and cannabis fits into those receptor sites, substrate, enzyme kind of receptor sites. Well, it's been around since the 40s that we knew about the endocannabinoid system. Every vertebrate on the planet has an endocannabinoid system. Your dog, your cat, anything that's got a bony backbone has this system. Again, it's perfectly natural, like your respiratory system, your cardiovascular system. It's a system in your body. And in that, we know that there were CB1 and CB2 receptor sites. Okay? Primarily, this means from my body, my cells, I've got these kinds of receptor sites, or CB1, or I've got these kinds of receptor sites. So different molecules, phytomolecules, bond to them. Okay? Primarily CB1, brain and spinal cord. This is where the THC is going to give you that euphoric feeling of, things are okay. I've lost my anxiety. CB2 receptor sites are primarily on our somatic cells, the rest of our body. This gives us anti-anxiety, pain relief, sleeplessness. This allows for CB2 receptor sites. And this is primarily the CBD is going to be like there. And, since the 40s, it was like, we got two. Now that the research is so opened up in the United States, we know that there are not just one and two. There's this whole list of others. And the researchers have said these are non-CB1, non-CB2. But there's like 25 of them, right? It's just a matter of, as more research comes in, we now know that we've got receptor sites all over our body that are doing all kinds of different things. It's not just CB1 and CB2. We have a number of these and more coming up all the time. So these are the receptor sites that, for example, GPR119 is primarily in the pancreas. Well, who knew that? Nobody did until it was legal to do the research. Just like California was scared to death that if they legalized cannabis, the federal government would pull their grants, would not allow them to get highways built, not get bridges built, all the stuff that we're actually not getting done. That's what they were afraid of. The colleges, the medical schools would lose their funding because of their federal research grants. None of that happened because all the other states were waiting. What's going to happen to California? If California takes a hit, we're not going to do this. California didn't take a hit, and the rest of the states are like, hey, we want to get on some of that tax money. Okay, so we know this is going on. We know that these are increasing. We're finding out more stuff all the time. Phytocannabinoids are, phyto means botanical, right? This is from the plant. It's naturally from the plant. You don't have to do anything to it. It's like you growing tomatoes. You don't have to do anything to the tomato. Take it out of your garden, and it's ready to ingest, digest, and go to your cells. Cannabis is like that. Right out of the plant, it's ready for your body to ingest and digest. How you get it really depends on what kinds of pains you've got, what kinds of conditions you've got that you've got to take care of. There are all kinds of things that people are using cannabis for today, currently. And again, medical, recreational, well, if you feel better, you act better. So kind of the same thing. Anandamide effects, we've got two, okay? And the easiest way for me to explain this is dealing with food, because that's what cannabis is to your body. It's food. If you think about your favorite meal, okay? We're going to play a little game. Think about your favorite food on earth. You're thinking about it. You're thinking about it. Your mouth is now full of spit. You're welcome. Your brain said, hey, we're thinking about whatever it is, and it's preparing you for that, so you release saliva into your mouth. Okay, now, whatever your favorite food is, I'm going to put it on the table in front of you and let you consume it. Completely different, right? One's thinking about it, that's a sub-threshold level. It's like a gun, and I feather the trigger, but don't pull the trigger far enough to actually fire the gun. Sub-threshold level. Threshold level. Once I hit that threshold level, that means I've consumed enough cannabis in whatever form I've got it in to take me above that mouthful of saliva into now I've got the impact. The reason why this is so important is because if you are staying below the sub-threshold level, right, staying below that threshold level, you never build up a tolerance. Hi, my name is Tom, and I use cannabis every day and have since 1969. Why am I not high on grandma's couch eating ho-hos? I can stay below the threshold level and I never build up a tolerance. Now I can build up a tolerance. Let me correct that. There were 13 years where I taught junior, senior high, but I also had to drive a school bus and be a basketball coach. During those 13 years, I stopped completely because I worked in the high school, and you know that random drug test thing? There was nothing random about it. Tom's down in room 6. He can pee in a cup every Friday. Well, obviously that's not random, but the rest of the bus drivers dropped off their kids and went home. I was available. You can stop and then start right back up again. There's not the cold sweats. It's not the, oh my God, I miss it. During that 13 years that I was a high school bus driver, I did consume 16 to 20 Tylenol a day. My arthritis was so bad. It was debilitating. Now, obviously Tylenol is terrible for you. And in those kinds of doses, it's toxic. Yes, I know. But, you know, to be able to get up in the morning and actually do stuff, that was the only alternative I had. I haven't had a Tylenol since. It's like, yay, right? My liver is back to normal-ish. Anandamide, sub-threshold, no problem with tolerance. The beauty of cannabis is withdrawal, 3 days. So if you're a big user of cannabis every day, above the threshold level, for years, decades, and take 3 days off, your tolerance goes back to 0. That's how quickly anandamide courses through your body, and you recycle those phytochemicals, and it's gone. 3 days. Now you can start over, right? So if you get to that point where it's like, dang, I'm spending a lot at the dispensary, take 3 days off, and now you're back to perfectly original state. Terpenes are another thing that we have to look at. When we talk about the cannabinoids, those are the phytomolecules made by the plant. And it's not just THC and CBD or CBG. There's actually hundreds of them. The last count, and this number keeps going up, was 213. 213 different molecules made by this plant that allow you all those different receptor sites in your body. It's not one receptor site for all of them. You've got all these receptor sites naturally for all these different compounds, phytocompounds that are made by the plant. So terpenes are basically oils. Terpenes are just as important as the CBDs and CBGs and those. Terpenes are essential oils like lavender and alpha-pinene and limonene. You know, those things that you can smell when you're in a pine forest, and it's like, wow, I love the smell of pine. What you're really smelling is the terpene, the alpha-pinene that is produced by the pine. Okay, now these plants produce these phytomolecules not for us, for themselves, right? Alpha-pinene, for example, is an anti-herbivory, prevents animals from eating it. How many times do you see something eating pine needles? Deer come in and rub, but they're not going to eat the pine needles. And the reason they don't is because the terpene says, don't eat me. Just self-defense for the plant. Plants can't get up and run. They can't fight back. They have to produce a chemical that produces some type of response for them. You know, when I was undergrad, we had, back in the 20s, we had a lab where we would grow tobacco in the greenhouse. And then we would take that tobacco in and feed it to grasshoppers that we had not allowed to eat for a couple of days. So they were really hungry grasshoppers. We take this, and tobacco is a beautiful plant. We take tobacco plant in, take a grasshopper, put it on there, and the grasshopper just immediately start eating. And and then shake and fall off the plant, which was hysterical. I mean, PETA was not happy because we were abusing grasshoppers, and that's why we don't do that anymore. But it shows you right away that tobacco plant has produced nicotine, a phytomolecule, to protect it from herbivory. And it works. It also, man found, hey, if we smoke this, chew this, whatever this, snort it up our nose, it will increase our blood pressure. And for some reason, we like that. So there's lots of different terpenes. When we talk about those drugs, I'm sorry. When we talk about drugs, the real Schedule I narcotics are legal. Tobacco and alcohol, those are Schedule I narcotics, but they're perfectly legal. And they're legal for a whole list of reasons that I don't have time to go into. We've got lots of studies that have been done. We've got lots of hows and whys of what you need. And we've got, if I can find the right, opportunities for everybody to learn more, because through the Outreach Center, we've got classes on medical marijuana and how to get your medical card. And I apologize for running late, but I'm pretty passionate about this. So if you have any questions, please feel free to talk to me anytime. Stop me on the street. I think this is really important. And if you've got any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer. Thank you for coming. Now go get to class.
Real quick.
Yes.
Real quick. What's the number one obstacle that we face to advancing public policy? So what needs to be broken? And what's the most effective thing that we can do to make good trouble?
Great question. The biggest problem right now in Illinois getting it federally legal is Big Canada doesn't want it federally legal. The prices of cannabis in Illinois are incredibly high, and they like it that way. And if it's federally legal, everybody in the country can sell their cannabis here. Oregon has 7 years of surplus. The price of cannabis in Illinois would crash. California gives joints away on the street as PR to get you to come in. Illinois would die. So our biggest problem, our biggest setback is money. The people that are making it want to keep making it, and that keeps us in the dark. 5 years ago, when cannabis was on the docket, 10 years ago, and got voted down, there was a grassroots that we now know is called AstroTurf, a grassroots organization in Illinois that said, we're Illinois Physicians for a Healthier Youth in our state. Being the nerd, I was like, okay, I'm curious, who are these? And come to find out through lots of dummy corporations, it was grant funded, it was Anheuser-Busch. Why was Anheuser-Busch spending millions of dollars? Money, competition. make good trouble, do the research, take the classes, find out why you've been lied to all these years, and you'll realize, oh, it's grandma's drug. It is. Again, thank you. Reach out. I have answers for you.